You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
You're listening to Fantha Tracks. Flip through the galaxy of literature. Welcome to Canon Fodder.
Grab your bookmarks, it's time to take cover as we unleash the Canon Fodder over the Star Wars galaxy of literature. Canon Fodder is the home on Fantha Tracks Radio for everything Star Wars literature, from comics, books, magazines, partworks, and everything else that comprises the expanded universe of Star Wars. Join me, Mark Newbold, with co-host Chris Davies as Chris chats to Sam Maggs. She's the author of Star Wars Battle Scars, the Star Wars Jedi Survivor tie-in novel. Chris and Sam had a great chat about anything and everything Star Wars. So here we go, it's Chris and Sam talking all about Battle Scars and much, much more.
Well, hi Sam, welcome to Canon Fodder.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
You've just released Jedi Battle Scars. You have a history in writing for video games, so this seems like a match made in heaven. How did you get involved with this project, and how did your experience help form the story you have gifted us with?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've written for video games for a long time now, close to a decade. And when I finished playing Jedi Fallen Order, I jumped on Twitter and immediately was like, who's writing Marin? Can I write the Marin book? Let me write Marin. Because I just fell in love with her character immediately. And I had done some writing previously for Lucasfilm and for the Star Wars sort of family. I had worked on a few comics for a line of theirs called Star Wars Adventures, which is like an all ages comic book line.
Of course,
which was super fun.
Yeah, that was a great series, that was.
Oh my God, I loved it too. I really miss having that line. I loved it. Those stories were really fun. I worked briefly on the Knights of the Old Republic remake while it was still with Aspire.
Yes.
I had to leave that project to take a full-time job, unfortunately, but that was really fun. And I also I had written a short story in the children's anthology, Stories of Jedi and Sith, about Luke Skywalker.
Yes, you did. I love that story.
Oh gosh, thank you.
Yeah,
that means a lot to me. It was really fun to write, and I think in retrospect, it seems like it was kind of my audition for a bigger piece with the Lucasfilm folks, So when I finished the game, I tweeted that, and it wasn't long after that my editor Tom Holler at formerly Del Rey, now Random House Worlds, sent me an email that was like, "Hey, we've been talking to Respawn about doing a book between the games. You would be the perfect person for it. You're the first person I'm coming to.
That's awesome.
Please tell me you'll do it." And I jumped at the opportunity. And I think to your point, it was in large part both because of my history writing for video games, but also because one of the things that Respawn noted that they wanted to be a part of the book, specifically, was that they wanted to canonize Marin's queerness, or her whatever the Star Wars equivalent of pansexuality would be. That was something. So Respawn. It did. It came directly from them that they were like, we envisioned this for her character from the start, and we kind of alluded to it in the first game, but there was no sort of neat way to bring that up effectively in the game. So they were like, we really want to make sure it's clear in the book this is canon. Yeah. So I think that's why I was sort of on top of the list for those guys, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you said about the Star Wars Jedi and Sith being almost like your audition, because I've noticed that being a fan, that a lot of the authors seem to show up in those collections, whether it's from a certain point of view, like Mike Chen did stuff there before he did Brotherhood, and others. I think that is what they do.
That's how I feel too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sneaky deep cut Legends references peppered throughout Battle Scars suggest that you're a long-time Star Wars fan. What was your relationship with the franchise growing up, and how does it feel to write your own entry into the canon?
Oh my gosh. Well, my parents were huge Star Wars fans. They saw A New Hope in theaters 22 times in the 70s. I was talking to them about this recently, and they told me that they showed up really, really early for Empire because they thought there was going to be a huge line. There was no one there, and they sat in the theater twice. They just stayed after the first showing to watch it again.
Wow, that's naughty but admirable.
I know, totally. And so I was sort of born into it. And I guess instead of rebelling and getting into football or something, I just sort of went with it. So Star Wars was a big part of my life. well, totally. But it was a big part of my life growing up. I remember my dad taking me out of school to go see Phantom Menace when it came. I was in like the 6th grade. I was 11, I think, when Phantom Menace came out, and they would like take me out of school for that stuff. And
wow.
yeah, we were always like big fans. I've joked about this on Twitter before, sort of like half jokingly, but I played a lot of Yoda stories growing up, which I still think
Wow.
is the pinnacle of Star Wars video games.
Yeah, that was a good game. It's quite a
It is.
mixed bag of games, but that one was
I know it is a terrible game, but I have a real soft spot in my heart for it. To
yeah.
be honest.
Let's be honest, most of those games back then quite terrible Star Wars ones, but I love them.
I mean, that's exactly how I feel, So I was like big into it. And so being able to contribute to the universe, especially in a way as like sort of significant as this novel, feels so huge. My dad is very thrilled about it, especially it's like a thing that my whole family understands, because we're all big nerds, and it's been very cool. I feel really lucky. I just spoke to someone who talked about how Star Wars will outlive us all, and we're just sort of the custodians of this current generation of it. And so to get to contribute to like this iteration of this mythos, or this modern mythos, is very cool.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you are following Fantha Tracks.
The references you do have in the book,
yes.
most of them seem to be quite Old Republic led. Does that come from your working on the game, or were you just a fan of that era of Star Wars? Like the circlet, that's from the Old Republic, not the Old Republic game, isn't it?
Yes, it totally is. It is because I'm a big fan of the game, to be honest, and of that era. Like I find it really interesting, but I used to work at BioWare. I'm a big fan of their sort of era of Star Wars stuff, of Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic. I love that stuff. So it felt cool. And I like when I work in other people's IPs, so often it seems silly to invent new things because there's so much gold already sitting in the lore. You just have to dig through it a little bit to find it. And I'm a researcher. Yeah, like I wrote nonfiction books and history books before I wrote fiction. I love to research. And so I loved digging through sort of Old Republic lore, trying to find the things that might be a good fit for this,
Well, it seems you're not the only one in Star Wars that's doing that at the moment. Judging by the Ahsoka trailer, people are taking lots from the past, from Legends, and they're putting it into canon, which, as a fan of both, is a big win for me.
Same. So. Huge same. Yeah, absolutely. Why throw away so much good,
Exactly. So Battle Scars acts as a bridge between Fallen Order and the upcoming game Survivor. And there's some fantastic character work in this book, especially with Merrin. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier. What was your main objective with this story? And was it always your intention to put the spotlight more firmly on Merrin?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely... Well, something that the book has the opportunity to do that the games do not is show us any other character's perspective that isn't Cal. Because we play from Cal's POV. Only in the book are you going to get to know, like, what is Seer thinking? What is Merrin thinking? And Merrin, I think, came into the game so late that we didn't get to see. Yeah, we don't get to see or know a lot about her. So she was like, when I first approached it, the book was very Merrin centric, because I was like, this is our opportunity to do something in this space that isn't like totally about Cal, which I think is really important and cool and interesting, So Merrin was always my focus and the sort of driving mechanism of the story. Yeah. And for her, it was really about finding the thing, Merrin has just had this horrible thing happen to her where she's lost her home, she's lost her people, her entire family, like everything she's ever known. And she's like an emo dark side girly. And she's thrown onto a boat with like the two goodiest two shoes that could possibly exist.
Especially.
Don't ever have it. Especially. Yeah. And their whole thing as Jedi, their whole ethos is like, don't have a bad feeling. Did you have a bad feeling? Push it down. Don't be angry. Don't feel sad. Like those things, that's their whole religion, right?
Yeah.
But like Merrin is not a Jedi. And we all know as humans that the grieving process starts with denial and then anger. And Merrin has been in a home with people for 2 years who have been saying like, don't be angry, don't experience anger. and she's sort of wondering why she can't get over it. And so the catalyst really was like, I wanted someone who could show up and tell Marin, like, why aren't you angry? You should be angry. Let yourself be angry. It's the only way out is through. You have to.
Yeah, it kind of underlined the sort of naivety of the Jedi somewhat, because to them it's really black and white, isn't it? Anger is bad, patience is good. Whereas Marin is, she's got a past, but she is inherently a good person. Yet she draws her power from her anger.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as black and white as Jedi think it is, and I found that really interesting in your book.
Oh, thank you. And I've joked about this in other interviews, but I'm low key like a Jedi Order hater. Like I think they suck in a lot of ways, and so it was fun to be able to kind of write that, and also fun to be able to write from the Fifth Brother's point of view.
Especially like the Jedi Order of the prequels, which Cal and Sir have come from, haven't they? That kind of dogmatic.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the Rey's New Order might be a bit better though, so we'll see about that one.
Right. Exactly.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
The character of Fret leaves quite the impression on the reader with her multi-layered and more complex motivations. Were you nervous to write a more overtly mature and sexual character than we typically see in Star Wars?
Actually wasn't at all. It felt really natural. I mean, I think you kind of see some of this in Andor as well. Like, it feels like a really natural evolution for the franchise, or not even evolution, but just like a thing that would happen. It just feels like a thing that would happen to people. It almost feels weirder that so much of Star Wars doesn't have that. Marvel is the same.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like void of that. And, we're passionate people. Relationships are passionate things. And it was important to me to kind of show that this is an important part of life, and it's an important thing for Marin. And especially with wanting to canonize Marin's queerness.
Yeah.
It felt doubly important to me that it wasn't just like a chaste little peck on the cheek that could be interpreted like any kind of way. Like, this was something that I really wanted to show that, like, she had real feelings about. It wasn't that she was using Fret, or Fret was using her, or it wasn't cheap, or anything like that. It was essentially like a summer romance that like affected both of them very deeply, which is a thing that can happen in your life. You meet people, they have a big impact on you for a short amount of time, and it's my hope that we see them meet again in the future in like a comic or something one day. I would love that. But like,
that would be amazing.
Oh God, I would love that. But it was important to end the book in a place where it left Marin open to other opportunities.
Hopefully, one of those from a certain point of view stories. They tend to like bring their characters back, don't they, in those anthologies, just like sneakily put them in there. So hopefully that's where we'll see that. We'll see Fret again.
I mean, I would love that. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it didn't make me nervous at all. And I love including sapphic characters. So I felt really fortunate to be able to do that.
I mean, can I just say though, as a reader, and I've spoken to a lot of other fans because I'm always on the Instagrams and things.
Yeah, of course.
That scene was something else. It seemingly, I mean, obviously, like you said, it's natural. Of course, that would happen. But because we're so used to reading Star Wars in a certain way, it knocked me for six in a really good way. And I don't think it will ever leave my head. Not in a weird way.
You're welcome. And my editor would say you should see the earlier versions of that scene before they were cut.
That actually brings on to the next question.
Yeah. So, anyway, thanks.
No. Speaking of things being cut, that actually brings on to my next question. So as mentioned earlier, there's quite a few obscure references to things from the previous canon, which I found quite surprising. Was there anything that you wanted to include that you weren't allowed to?
Ooh, that is a great question. I was actually just talking in an earlier interview. Fret is Kashiri because I originally wanted to make her Chiss. I thought it would be cool if she was Chiss like Thrawn, but Lucasfilm rightly was like, there's only one Thrawn. That's the whole point of Thrawn. And I was like, great point. This is why you guys are the lore masters. Like,
just gone over the head straight to Timothy Zahn and see what he says.
Yeah, exactly. So that was definitely in there. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of other things. Ooh, I really wanted to name the Bogling. But they also rightfully were like, the Respawn people should get to do that. And I was like, that's totally fair.
What would you have named the bugling?
Oh, I was just selfishly going to name her after my own dog, or a version of my own dog's name. Phoebe. That is the one thing that I read the book and I'm like, it's weird that the bogling's been on the ship for 2 years and no one's given it a name, or like however many years. No one's named it, but that makes sense. Like, I want them to be able to own that, you know.
I mean, there is something in the book, isn't there, about that? How is it? I think it's Grease, isn't it? Who's just like determined not to get attached to the bogling, but totally is.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Ain't that Grease with everybody, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want to like any of you. And yet here I am.
Yeah, by the end of the book, it's quite a different story, isn't it, with Grease?
Yeah, Grease really goes through it in this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was when I first came onto the project, you know, Respawn sat down with me and they gave me a kind of one sheet of everything that they needed to happen in the book. You know, like Marin's sexuality, the crew starting to form some tensions. And they also showed me a slideshow of the story of Survivor, everything that happens in Survivor. And one of their big asks was like, well, by the time we get to Survivor, Grease doesn't have an arm. So we would love to know how that happened. Let us know. And I was like, absolutely, I'm all over it. There is an earlier draft where Seer is the one who cuts off his arm.
Oh, wow.
In like a fit of going to the dark side.
I mean, yeah, there's precedent for that, isn't there?
There is, but I think that, you know, we changed it, and I think rightfully so, because my editor, Tom Holler, who's like a genius, was very much like, that's Seer's arc in the first game. Like in the first game, she goes dark side, protect people at any cost. There's a horrible cost, and she sort of vows to never do that again. And he was like, we can't really go back there for her. What happens after that for Seer? And to me, the answer to that was she swings way too far in the opposite direction. And so I think that actually made for a way more interesting story for Seer than in like my earlier drafts. But again, that kind of speaks back to like, what did I do earlier that got changed or whatever, but it's way better in this final version. But yeah.
Plus Grease gets to have his hero moment, doesn't he? Protecting
totally. Cal. Yeah, he does. I mean, he tries his best, you know.
And it works. You know, that's a Jedi survivor, so he obviously did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. And he has a cool new bionic arm, as we've seen in the trailer. So
yeah, do you know what? When I saw the trailer for that, the only thing I was looking for was like, show me Grease's arm.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's there. Cool, we're good guys.
It's shiny. It looks beautiful, but you know, probably still giving him some issues of driving a ship. I'm sure. Yeah,
I mean, again, that was a good moment as well. Like, afterwards, when Fret has to drive the ship, there was a good little bit of conflict there, because obviously he wasn't the biggest fan of Fret, was he? So the fact that he has to do that because he's incapacitated.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Hey, it's Alyssa Wong, writer of Dr. Aphra, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Two-part question. What Star Wars story would you love to write? And if you had to recommend one Star Wars book other than this one, what would it be?
These are both great questions. I would love to write more Marin. I know this is a cop-out answer, but it is absolutely the truth. Marin is my girl. I would love to write comics with Marin. I think there's so much like visual potential, right? Like her powers are so visually interesting that I think a comic with her would be very cool. Would love to do that.
What Marin comic would you like to do, and who would you like it to be? Who would you like it to be partnered with? So, for example, Marin goes on an adventure with Dr. Aphra or with Luke Skywalker.
I was literally going to say Dr. Aphra. I'm so glad you brought her up because I love her character, and I feel like the two of them would be such an interesting, like, semi-dark side.
Because they're both chaotic, but in completely different ways.
Yeah, well, exactly. And they're both like sapphic characters, which is really interesting. Yes. Yeah, I think I would love to see the two of them and their sort of moral grayness work together. Would be,
and it'd be awesome if there's potential, you know, love connection there, just to annoy Santa.
Totally.
You know, that'd be amazing.
Literally, yes. That would be dope. We actually talked about, I mean, I have a couple. I think Delilah Dawson is brilliant. I love Phasma. Her next book, her Inquisitor book, is going to be incredible.
Yes.
Big fan of her work. And also Mike Chen. I think Brotherhood is incredible. I'm obsessed with it. He did an amazing job with those characters. So they're big for me.
The thing that really impressed me about Brotherhood, I don't know if you agree, was that it felt like a direct sequel to Attack of the Clones, while not sideline Revenge of the Sith. Because we already got a sequel to it, but this felt like more of a sequel to Attack of the Clones than Revenge of the Sith did.
Oh, I think that's such a good way of putting it. I think feels like, a direct continuation.
Yeah, in every way.
Of that. yeah, like you could see it happening. One of the reasons I think they put me on this book is because I'm a huge Fallen Order fan. I loved the characters, and I hope it comes through in the book. I think that is absolutely true of Mike Chen with Attack of the Clones. Like, that's a prequel stan right there.
Oh, right,
that man loves Attack of the Clones. You know, you can tell, and it comes through in the book so much. And like, that's what I love about that. And that's what I think is the genius of the people that Lucasfilm chooses to pair up with. Like, they're really good at making those choices. They're really sharp about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm with you on Delilah Dawson as well, because Phasma was wonderful and Black Spire was just as good.
Yes. Oh my God, totally. Delilah's characters have a certain kind of interesting darkness to them that I love. I mean, her whole shtick is writing, like, again, morally gray kind of female characters.
Yeah.
And we don't get a lot of that, especially in Star Wars. We're
getting more, but not really. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like more, yeah, to your point, more and more now. Again, it's what I love about Marin and writing Marin so much, and, you know, Dr. Aphra. But yeah, that's why I love her books in particular. I think they pose some really interesting questions.
Yeah, and obviously V was such a great character, and the relationship with Marchex, and the fact that V just naturally came across as asexual, and it made sense with the character. I loved that. Me
too. It's my favorite kind of like inclusion, you know, when you don't have to mention it at all. I was saying this in an earlier interview to you, like, it is my dearest hope that we one day get to never talk about that stuff again, because it just like is, you know, we're not there yet. And so it's a joy for me to be able to talk about it, and I'm glad to, you know, but I would love to get there.
Well, Michael Siglane, if you're listening, we need a Marin and Dr. Aphra comic. It could be a mini-series, I don't mind, but let's do that, please.
Yeah, let's make it happen. Let's make it happen.
Well, thank you for your time.
This was so great, Chris. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for your time. And
no problem.
May the force be with you.
May the force be with you. Thank you very much, Sam.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this very special episode of Canon Fodder. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Fanthatracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fanthatracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK time, 4 PM Eastern, and 1 PM Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday at 7 o'clock UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Canon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks, and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.